Well, Janan, are you excited? So maybe you can ask Chaitan if he remembers this evening, just out of curiosity, when you see him on Friday. All right. Time to introduce the roast area for Jianan. Well, let me begin by pointing out that not all lazy lecturers get a song. That depends on two conditions: finding appropriate roastable materials and inspiration. So our honored guest has had two significant periods in her professional career. She spent about 10 years at Bell Laboratories and 22 years at Stanford University. The first period looked better in terms of roastable material, but also had some untouchable drama. So I opted for the second. So at Stanford, she has pioneered electronic skin, artificial electronic skin, for robotic, prosthetic, and health monitoring applications, including wearables. I think most of you have attended her talk, but there are a few people who don't know about it, so I have to introduce this a little bit, because the poem is about the skin. So she gets inspired by real skin to create thin plastic foils that behave similarly to real skin. That is bend, twist, stretch, stretching, very important. They can also sense pressure, temperature, they can monitor the heart rate, probably blood oxygenation, etc., etc. So the latter requires sensors based on electrical signals, or those that produce electrical signals that must be transmitted with transistors and wires. I talked about it this afternoon. So looking for simpler materials than reading her papers, I found various science news articles, a few titles: Skin-Inspired Electronics, Soft E-Skin for electronic skin that talks to the brain, Advancing toward wearable, stretchable electronics, etc., etc. So one of the articles began with a sentence. Actually, this one was in the Neuroscience News of Stanford. So that article began with a sentence: the skin is full of contradictions. And the point being that the skin is soft and pliable, yet resilient and tough. It can sense the landing of a butterfly, yet sustain the blow of a hammer. It's a barrier to germs, yet it transmits signals to allow communication with the outside world. So the skin, as you know, is an organ. And with all these contradictory properties, one could think of it as a rebel organ. All right. Now, that first sentence had a nice ring to it. The skin is full of contradictions. Depending on how you sing it, you know, it can sound like the skin is full of contradictions. Well, if you sing it properly, and I know I cannot sing, so, although in my mind I sing perfectly. But so it sounded to me like l'amour est un oiseau rebelle. So that's French for love is a rebel bird. And that's the opening line from Peau-banera by Georges Bizet, from the same opera that Tivoli's second song comes from. Well, that was it. So there are only three parts of this poem that need explanation. The rest, you figure it out. And there are no footnotes, by the way. The footnotes were intended to tell you where the humor is. Well, if you cannot spot the humor today, okay. What can I say? So the poem begins with a line in French. I couldn't resist this. So we're going to learn some French today. Skin is peau in French. P-E-A-U, la peau. So, and as I said earlier, if the skin is a rebel bird, maybe I can sing the skin is a rebel organ. So that's what you will hear in that opening line. So the rest is in English, no problem there. So the second thing I want to point out too is that Professor Bauer has disclosed that her group gets inspired by superheroes. Sounds interesting. So there is a reference in one of her interviews to a science fiction movie called X-Men Wolverine. Remember that? So, I mean, I didn't know what this movie was. I don't know about you, but... So I actually watched a trailer and found out that the movie is really unwatchable, so I don't know. I don't know how people can get inspired by it. But at any rate, there is one aspect of it that, of course, her group is pushing, which is that in this film, the skin of the superheroes heals much faster than human skin. So they get shot, there is a rupture, but that heals itself in seconds. All right? So that idea has led the Peau group to impart healing properties to the e-skin, and that's significant. That's really a major accomplishment. So I have to make fun of it. The third thing I want to point out too is that the sensing properties of the electronic skin can, or so they claim, can be communicated by voltage pulses, similar to how neurons communicate. So this opens up the possibility, of course, of connecting the e-skin to brains. In fact, one of the titles I mentioned before of an article is Soft E-skin that talks to the brain. Of course, this could also allow communicating these same signals via Bluetooth, for example, to your doctor to monitor your health. Well, do you see a risk here? Well, the poem will conclude with that. It will ponder that. And now is the time for you to open the envelope. So before we start, though, I'd like to acknowledge Don Caldwell for help with the musical score, a task he performs pro bono every year. Don was the director of the Caltech Glee Club for 24 years. Without his help, none of these performances would be possible. So Don, please stand up and please applaud him.
rebelle, so soft, so sensitive, yet strong. It stretches, flexes, sweats as well, keeps germs away the whole day long. A feather's touch, it feels so lightly, a hammer's blow, it won't complain. A scalpel's cut, a bit unsightly, then quietly it heals again. The skin, so thin, can stretch to extreme. You cannot build such living foil with chips of silicone and film so stiff they crack at modest tensile toil and could delaminate with slightest whiff. And if you try to pull it, stretching it will make it break. Then thou whispers, softness mine. it, stretching it will make it break. Then thou whispers, softness matters, or else fubar. Our skin is built with great intent to bend and twist, contract, extend, with polymers and ion knots thus wrought, plus ligand bonds that pull it taut. Her transistors they stretch and heal, a Wolverine-inspired zeal, and when it tears, it mends itself. No need for band-aids from your shelf. Skin can feel, can stretch and heal on fingers laid like a tattoo. It helps you learn from handshake cues. It talks to brains through neural spikes, and then your heart and blood are in its sides. It seems innocuous, but what if it reveals you're in heat? Should you wear it, just be cautious. Don't spill the tea.